Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And very good morning indeed to you. You remember, it's only in the last few weeks that we've coined the term peak goldfish, isn't it? You know that the people who are persuaded by the alleged attractions of either Brexit or Donald Trump need to be given slogans by their groomers which enable them to avoid going peak goldfish. So today the Electoral Commission reports and indeed finds that Vote Leave is due a £61,000 fine, and it broke electoral law. Matters have been referred to the police. So what you need, if you're one of the people that's been mugged by these chancers, you need a slogan to pretend that you haven't. And that slogan today will be, what about the leaflet the government sent out, which is not illegal, but hey, at least it stops you going full goldfish. And secondly, we deny it. It's politically motivated. So those, please ring me and make those points if you've already fallen into this trap. Those are the things that stop people from going goldfish. What you saw yesterday in Finland was Donald Trump effectively having to say something that stops him going full goldfish. When he's asked to condemn Vladimir Putin's meddling in American elections, he has two choices. He either reflects reality, or he just says something that's not true in the hope of avoiding going peak goldfish. So he came out and essentially sided with an enemy state. Don't forget, a dictator who has ordered the murder of British citizens on British soil over his own intelligence agencies. So we put a clip out yesterday, but it's 5 minutes after 10, by the way. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm just going to talk today. So the phone lines are open. I'm not necessarily moving towards a question, but I want you to get involved as quickly or as soon as you want. I will sporadically remind you of the phone number, 0345 6060 973. But given that these stories so obviously intermingle with each other, we're going to just kind of see where our meanderings take us in the first instance. So when I said to you yesterday, I very, very, very occasionally watch back the clips that the internet department punt out into the wider world. I don't watch them back very often because, contrary to popular belief, I'm not so in love with the sound of my own voice that I enjoy watching my own pontifications on a loop. I seatbelt the kids to the sofa and put it through on the internet telly. But I watched back yesterday's because occasionally I have little things I think, did you go a bit far there? Did you get that wrong? So I watched back yesterday's when I was explaining in, I think, relatively straightforward terms why fake news exists, what is the point of fake news. And I was thinking more about the astonishing sight of the President of the United States of America standing next to our Prime Minister and describing a tape that we had listened to that morning, a recording of his own voice, as fake news. That for me was a remarkable moment, a truly pivotal moment actually in the relationship between government and media, because shortly after that Donald Trump of course refused to take a question from a CNN reporter, and Theresa May let him. At that point our Prime Minister became complicit in the suppression of a free press. But everything's so mad at the moment, we're not noticing this stuff. Yesterday in Finland, Donald Trump stood up and sided with an enemy foreign power over his own intelligence agencies. And it was always leading up to this. He's probably going to get away with it because we've become so corrupted. I don't know what happens next. I've given up making predictions because they keep coming true. And what he did there was the culmination of the whole fake news project. So when I watched back the clip yesterday, I thought, yeah, I think you're right, but it's going to be a while before we can prove it. And then Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin stood up in Finland and completely proved it, beyond any shadow of any doubt. The moment that Donald Trump sided with Vladimir Putin against his own intelligence agencies, his own Justice Department, his own... Actually, I mean, even the Republicans in the Senate are up in arms today. Paul Ryan, all sorts of characters that have been fairly slavish in their sycophancy, appear suddenly to have woken up. I have got a horrible feeling they'll go back to sleep again. But what happened there was the point of the whole fake news project. Now that it is clear Donald Trump is siding with Putin over America, he needs the base to have something that stops them going peak goldfish. Yeah? So all of the people who have been persuaded that Donald Trump is anything other than a narcissistic sociopath, they need something now. Hang on a minute, your man has sided with Vladimir Putin over America. This is insane. But they can't admit it. They can't say, yeah, I've absolutely been conned. So they get given fake news. It's the mother of all fig leaves. They can just say fake news. They don't even know what it means. They don't even know how it's relevant to this. But it's fake news. And witch hunt. That's the other one he's put out there. He's rather good at it. I mean, there's no point pretending otherwise. But when you are left with undeniable evidence that you have been silly, that you have been an idiot, that you have been conned, you are so desperate not to admit it that you'll take anything that they give you. And what Donald Trump has given them over the course of the last 18 months is fake news and latterly witch hunt. So there are people in jail already as a result of Mueller's investigation. There are, you know, so many people have already coughed, already pleaded guilty, already cooperating, and yet he still continues with the argument that it's not true. Only 2 people in that room yesterday subscribed to the belief that it wasn't true. One of them was Vladimir Putin and the other one was Donald Trump. Phone lines are open, 0345 6060 973. So whether it will work or not, we'll have to wait and see. But the same thing's happening in Britain with the Brexit story today, with the Vote Leave story, the fig leaves that they've been given. You're supposed to ring me up now and say, yeah, but what about that leaflet that the government sent out? To which I would reply by saying 2 things. But you won't hear, you see, because you can't. Because if you hear, you go goldfish. Your mouth moves, but no words come out. Once you remove these fig leaves, well, it's not the same because one of these actions breaks electoral law and one of them doesn't. Politically motivated. It's politically motivated. No, it isn't. The Electoral Commission dropped the ball on this. It was only after a judicial review was brought that the investigation continued, and they have found Vote Leave guilty. The numbers are astonishing. A fashion student who had previously raised the princely sum of £21.50 for his own organisation suddenly gets given just north of £620,000 by the outfit headed by Michael Gove, who's still in the cabinet. Do you see what I mean? I mean, it's so complete now, the corruption, that you almost don't notice it because we're so up against it. It's like our nose is up against the window. We can only see what's an inch in front of us. We can't step back and identify the full scale of the problem. That list of names that I just gave you of people who sat on the committee of the organisation that has found to have broken electoral law. Electoral law. And these are men and women still at cabinet level of British politics. I think for the first time in a while I'm at a bit of a loss this morning because it's now so obvious that what we have feared for so long is so true. And yet it's so clear to anyone who's been paying attention that significant swathes of the country, possibly even half, will still put their fingers in their ears and close their eyes. And that's not true, actually, because there's an awful lot of people who don't give a fig one way or the other, and I almost envy them. I almost hope that this difficulty goes away and normal service is somehow resumed without any sort of apocalyptic effect upon our democracy, if it hasn't already happened, of course. And then you can wake up in 2 or 3 years' time and you won't even know how close we came to the precipice. But I don't know which way you want to go first. Do you want to go Trump first or Brexit first today? I think we have to go Trump first, actually. I think. Do you know, somebody said to me when he got elected, someone in this game, a journalist, a rather different political outlook to me, said, it's great, it's going to be chaos. Chaos is great for us. And I said, yeah, I mean, a little bit of chaos is good for us. Gives us stuff to write about, gives us stuff to talk about. But if you really follow this guy, this isn't going to be chaos in any normal sense. This is going to be Kremlin-funded kleptocracy. And now we know it's true. 0345 6060 973. I think I just want to know what you think it means. What does it mean that the President of the United States of America now prioritises the Russian head of state above his own government, above his own country? What does that mean? 0345 6060 973. And part of the problem isn't the fake news, it's tabloid journalism. And tabloid journalism now applies to pretty much every newspaper in Britain and most commentators, where what you do when you get up in the morning is you don't look for light, You don't look for insight. You don't look for illumination or understanding. You look for blue touch paper. What can I set fire to today that's going to just set off some fireworks? Because fireworks are fun, right? We all like looking at fireworks. What can we have a fight about today? What can we argue about today? And the people who've dedicated their careers to that sort of journalism, they don't know what to do now. They don't know what to do. They encourage you to vote Brexit. Brexit is an unmitigated disaster that's falling apart at the seams, but they encouraged all their readers to vote for it. They're still pretending it might be all right. The BBC has tied itself in knots over the Vote Leave story. It allowed Vote Leave to set the terms of how this story broke and continues today to amplify what the Electoral Commission have found to be lies when Vote Leave claimed that they couldn't get interviewed. I mean, I had a brief exchange on Twitter with one of my LBC colleagues about this, and modesty prevents me from saying I told you so, but it was so obvious what was happening that I couldn't understand how apparently intelligent, engaged people were falling for it. And of course the answer is, when it's right in front of you, you don't appreciate the full scale of it. You might go out for dinner with some of these people. A fella that set up Vote Leave also knocks around with the Taxpayers Alliance, and they're all mates in all the sort of right-wing think tanks. So it's all just chumocracy, and it never crosses the mind of some journalists that they might actually be witnessing breaches of electoral law, not just your usual shenanigans, your lobbying and your posturing and your spinning, but actual breaches of electoral law. So that's a clumsy attempt to thread some sort of, or introduce some sort of thread through the Trump and the Brexit stories. There are no more important stories in town this year. The fact that the official Leave campaign cheated, and the President of the United States of America has chosen Vladimir Putin over his own country. These are epic, epic moments in history on both sides of the Atlantic. But the fake news narrative, the dedication to heat instead of light, the binary search, the invitation to pick a side and start lobbing insults and abuse at the other side has rendered us, I think, incapable of coping with this. And that, I think, is my starter for 10 this morning. I don't think the West has got the institutions in place to cope with what's happening. I just don't. I don't think America knows what to do with Donald Trump, who's now clearly a Russian asset. A Russian asset. Even I would have laughed at me a year ago or 2 years ago. To use that phrase, there is no other explanation for what Donald Trump did yesterday. He is a Russian asset. And the people that won the referendum campaign cheated. Where do we go next? 03456060973 is the number that you need. What happens next? The American president is a Russian asset, and Brexit was won by cheats. Well, I don't know. Hopefully someone will. I wonder whether today's one of those days when we do the trick you only pull out of the bag on special occasions. Imagine someone's been in a coma for 2 years, or 2.5 years, and they've just woken up, and you now need to explain to them how you ended up with a Russian asset in the White House and a vote to leave the European Union won by cheats. 03456060973. And on the second one, and I will try and nip it all together, or knit it all together, on the second question, the question of how we can be comfortable with the fact that cheats won, there's two things to say. The first is that no one thinks they were cheated. No one ever thinks they were conned. It's always other people that were conned. So you can say, I don't care about the fact that they cheated. Because they didn't convince me. I voted because of fish and passports and sovereignty. I didn't vote but they literally were targeting people via their social media and spending this money on doing so. That's the incredible thing. It's a bit like now, I'll tell you where we are now if you're a Brexiter and you've been conned. You're insisting that that hole that you just spent a year digging had nothing to do with the buried treasure sign that was stuck in the ground above it. So they stuck buried treasure signs all over your garden. You've spent a year digging holes wherever there was a buried treasure sign. The buried treasure signs were lies. But that's not why you dug the hole. No, you dug the hole because, it's good for the exercise and you wanted to test out your new spade. You did not dig the hole because there's a buried treasure sign parked in the middle of your lawn. You dug the hole because you like digging. The buried treasure sign was a complete coincidence. Other people might have fallen for it, but you were too clever to do so. So I'm in that weird position where I don't know how to handle the conversation this morning. Let's do it that way round to start with. If I had come out of a coma, 2.5 years, in a coma. So when I went to sleep, we were in the European Union. Barack Obama was president of America. Everyone was laughing at the idea of an orange reality television star running for president. And now, not only is he president, but he's clearly a Russian asset. And we voted to leave the European Union as a result of a successful campaign led by cheats and liars. I don't even know if I'm legally obliged at this point to say that they deny being cheats and liars. The Electoral Commission has handed in its findings. The fines have been issued. So, yeah, to do that. Let's do that. It might be fun, all right? I've been in a coma for 2.5 years. What the hell happened while I was out? Tet's in Ealing. Tet, what would you like to say?
James, I'd say that while you were in the coma, the chickens came home to roost. The logical conclusion of the narratives we've actually been running, telling each other, feeding each other for years, it kind of came to their end, and we wound up with a person who is supporting a foreign power over his own intelligence services, and a movement into kind of a new economic future, which is incredibly uncertain, and which I still believe a lot of people, though they feel very passionately about it, aren't really sure of what the consequences are.
Oh, they haven't got a clue. They haven't got a clue. I think one of the most difficult things to do at the moment in the political arena, and I'm cool with it because I've got skin like a rhinoceros, but I know an awful lot of people have been cowed into being quiet. People are speaking up for those who are going to get hurt, and those who are going to get hurt are spitting back in their faces and abusing them. It's quite incredible. I spent some time with Gina Miller the other night, an amazing woman, and her financial situation is not going to be compromised by Brexit. She might not be as wealthy as she currently is, but she's still going to be very, very comfortably off. All of her interest is protecting those who are going to be considerably poorer, and that's where she's getting the death threats from. It's quite incredible. But talk to me more about the narratives, because it's an overused word these days. It sometimes it covers up understanding. Well, because I've been asleep for 2.5 years. When I fell asleep, there was Islamophobia was around, and Euroscepticism was around, but they were kind of a little bit on the lunatic fringe. Donald Trump was making noises about running for president, but he'd just spent the previous 3 years telling lies about Barack Obama's birth certificate, so no one was going to take all of that seriously, and all of a sudden they did.
I mean, I think that the narrative is one which pitched everything into the hands and into the favour of massive corporate interests, which are controlled by very few people. And as Anna Soubry said, I think yesterday, that it's extraordinary that people with gold-plated life insurance
pensions,
and
yes, you're right.
Pensions and inherited wealth are leading us into something which will be paid for by the jobs of people who don't have any of those assets, and everybody's clapping. But if we brainwashed people into thinking that, yes, there was an empire, yes, Britain is great in this and that way, without actually facing the facts of what's going on, or painting the facts or the consequences of that thinking as some kind of awful anomaly of which we are the victims. Like, look at the invasion. What's happening from Africa is an invasion. It is this immigration thing across the Mediterranean is the absolute consequence of us telling each other that, look, it's great to bomb Libya, it's great to destabilize all these nations. And those narratives, James, I'm a person of African origin. They keep you and me, I'm also a British citizen, wealthy.
Yeah, well,
we have no percentage in biting the hand that's feeding us something that salves our conscience. We'll toss a few bob every now and again in terms of aid and so on and so forth, and pat ourselves on the back for being such gracious people. But actually, many of the policies that we're following abroad are creating these problems which are now fetching up on our shores.
And to admit that, of course, is to admit responsibility, which they can't do.
Totally.
I'm going to crack on. I sense that, like me, you could talk uninterrupted until Friday on this subject, but in the interests of tone and variety, I am going to move on. I haven't, and to be honest, if you'd given me a definitive answer, it wouldn't have been that helpful because I'd have to find something else to talk about for the rest of the show. But what we haven't got to the nub of yet is what's happened in the short term. You're absolutely right about the long term. We created the refugee crisis with our failure to properly address Assad in Syria. We left the door open for Vladimir Putin. Barack Obama bears some responsibility for that, but if he'd launched a foreign war in the Middle East, he would have been crucified at home. There's all these variables. Two problems immediately emerge. The first is that if you recognise Barack Obama as a flawed but honest politician, you don't put yourself in the position of having to slavishly defend everything he ever did. There you go. I just said I think he got Syria wrong. But if you're a Donald Trump supporter, you can't admit that he's done anything wrong. Until yesterday, when an awful lot of people who've previously been on side essentially recognised his treason. Sebastian's in Paris. Sebastian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yes. Well, I'm in total agreement with what you just said, basically. That.
Well, that's no good. Honest. Can't you say something about leaflets or political motivation or fake news?
Well, fake news is an interesting concept in itself, but I was reading just after Trump was elected. I was seeing on the Daily Beast website that a member of the U.S. intelligence community had said to a Daily Beast reporter that this guy's going to die in jail for what he'd done. I think both Trump's election, his current actions, and the nonsense going on around Brexit, which personally I find totally heartbreaking, basically you could read a Russian narrative into this, in that it has been Russian foreign policy for a very long time to destabilize the European Union, to destabilize the West more generally, and I think they've won. They've done a perfectly good job in ruining both the US. You see the position that the US is diminished in now, and until the Republicans in the United States, stop sitting on their hands and tacitly, well, not so tacitly, supporting Trump and what he does, and recognize that he is a traitor. He has committed treasonous acts, and it has to come from the Republicans, because it was the Republicans who got rid of Nixon, and until they do the same thing with Trump, I don't see how it's going to, how much worse is it got to get before it gets any better on the Trump situation.
I don't know what happens next. As he said himself, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. I've just realised I've got to update the chapter on my book now. I'm flipping Donald Trump, honestly. But in terms of the 2.5 years in a coma, I know that's a little bit facile, a little bit simplistic, but I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that someone could have just missed the last 2.5 years. What would you point at first as the reason for how we've ended up with a Russian asset in the White House and a decision to leave the European Union led by liars and cheats? No pressure, Sebastian.
I think in the first case, the election of Trump was being nudged in that direction because, unfortunately, you have to give it to the Democrats to say that Hillary Clinton was a flawed candidate, didn't put up a good enough and a convincing enough argument. And I think there are certain parallels between both Clinton's election and Clinton's non-election, rather,
yes,
and the Brexit result.
A sort of complacency.
The complacency and the almost said right thinking, but that's not quite the word. The common sense view was that, well, obviously she's going to win. Obviously Remain is going to win, because we're sensible people and we read properly and, we're...
Yes, but this is part of the answer unintentionally is that you now could be unfairly characterised as condescending, sneering, out-of-touch elite, because people like you and me, I think, had too much faith in our fellow humans, and we thought, and I presume this is true in America as well, nobody serious is going to believe lies on this scale, things that are so obviously untrue and so easily disprovable. But then you're back to the birth certificate and the bendy bananas. People did. They believed both. That possibly is the pivot point. Is it a conscious decision to believe things that aren't true, to venerate liars? Because lying, as we learned last week, lying kind of proves that this bloke is standing up to the system, and the system is the reason why my life is rubbish. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I'm not making any predictions today. I'm giving up on predictions. I've told you they keep coming true. Where we are being a little bit irresponsible, but only because I can't think of a more responsible way to address the questions facing politics today. If I had been asleep for 2.5 years and I woke up yesterday and this morning to discover, A, that the Russians have the American president in their pocket. Donald Trump yesterday publicly sided with Vladimir Putin over his own intelligence agencies, his own justice system. So he's either unbelievably stupid, and I don't think he is, not in the sense that I mean, or he is a Russian asset. 03456060973. How did that happen? I've been asleep for 2.5 years. When I fell asleep, he was banging on about Barack Obama's birth certificate, but everyone with a brain knew that was absolute Horlicks. How's he ended up being president? And the second thing is, we now know, thanks to the Electoral Commission, that Vote Leave cheated and lied. And yet we're still heading along with the Brexit that they won. So we're doing a Brexit that was essentially masterminded by cheats and liars, and we've got a Russian asset in the White House. And I was only asleep for 2.5 years. What the hell happened? 03456060973. Matt's in Reading. Matt, what have you got?
Hi, James. I think that a lot of it, as I was just saying to your research there, is to do with the sort of megaphone of social media, the amplification of a small idea into a huge one by people who have an opinion only and not really a great deal of factual... But
an opinion is worth the same as a fact. That's the essence of the zeitgeist, isn't it? Is it your opinion? Yeah. Everything from vaccines to climate change... wherever it leads you, it leads to fag packet fascists turning up at the gates of Great Ormond Street with a film crew claiming that they know more about the doctors inside, about the illness of a little boy on the ward. Yeah,
everybody has a platform, and the thing is, I was saying to your researcher, I find myself scared because I was watching both the press conferences, the Putin one. I listened to the whole thing on LBC yesterday, and the Theresa May one. I listened to the whole of that as well. And there were bits of it that drew me in. The idea that an America and a Russia talking and cooperating together is a positive thing for the world is something that Trump said. And I found myself sitting there thinking, this is good.
That's what you're supposed to chew on.
This is good, exactly, and that's. Yeah. And I would consider myself educated. And
I can hear the frustration in your voice, but it's a bit like when you're on holiday in a town square and there's a bloke doing the thing with the cards, and you watch it and you know it's a con, but you think, hang on a minute, I think I could win this. I think I could beat this guy.
That's another problem for me, though, James, because I'm actually blind.
Oh, and so well, you wouldn't be able to find the lady then, Matt. Forgive me.
But this is it. But I wonder and I worry if I lose an essential part of the dialogue because I can't see the memes that are trending. I can't see the body language. There was a thing I read yesterday that said that Trump winked at Putin before the press conference as if to say, and I was like, did he?
Yes.
What does that mean? Did he wink at him in a certain... And because I can't see, I'm beginning to worry that there is a visual element to this.
Well, I don't know if it will be any comfort.
I
don't know if it will be any comfort to you, but I suspect you're probably getting a clearer signal than we are, because the visuals can be very distracting. That wink, it wasn't like Cristiano Ronaldo after he got carded. Was it Rooney who got anyway? It wasn't like Cristiano Ronaldo when Portugal were playing England. I think it was more because I'm a very big winker, Matt, I have to confess, and I just do it in the same way that other...
You spelled that correctly.
But yes, exactly. I said Ivan was hovering over the dump button like a helicopter. I wink in the way that other people smile. It's a greeting. And I think that's all it was. I think it was just a kind of a reflex action. But you're right, I think, to point out that line about cooperation. How can it be bad? Because he did the same thing in North Korea, and it speaks. I think it speaks to the good in us. Actually, this is something that the best con men do: is that they speak to the good in their victims, not just to the bad. So the bad, he's got signed up. The bad are all on side. The people who want to blame their whole lives on immigration, they're going to follow him to the ends of the earth. But the rest of us who can't believe what's going on, you sort of look for silver linings. You look for evidence that things aren't quite as bleak as you believe they are, and that's what you did yesterday. I'm too far gone. It was when he mentioned Bill Browder my friend Bill Browder up on the stage that I realised my somewhat idealistic hope that things weren't as bleak as they looked had disappeared. We'll talk a little more about Bill shortly. Cyril, meanwhile, is in Slovenia, in going to have a go. Ljubljana. It's that middle L that's tricky, Cyril, isn't it? Because I could do Ljubljana, but it's Ljubljana. Ljubljana.
Not even we are able to pronounce it correctly.
Oh, well, that's very reassuring. That's very reassuring. What would you like to say? Well, I've been asleep for 2.5 years.
Good news.
Yes.
While you've been in coma for this 2.5 years,
Yes.
we learned a lot more about European Union. About the institutions, how it works.
You're
and
just
it's thanks
trolling
to
me.
you.
You're trolling me now.
Yeah, but how come you were able to educate us whilst being in coma? I mean, kudos to you.
I think you're taking the analogy a little bit too far. It's getting a little torturous now. Obviously, I have been on the radio for the last 2.5 years on a very steep learning curve, but it's pretending that I hadn't. Go on.
Thanks to you too. So that's a good thing. And there's a bone I have to pick with Britain. You rained on my parade because I finished my studies with cum laude. I finished my master's degree on 24th of June 2 years ago.
Oh, Lord.
On the very day the Brexit results were announced, and I was happy and in shock at the same time.
Yes, I can imagine. That is some bittersweet experience.
So hopefully, I'm the guy who's calling you from time to time and inviting Britain to get to its senses and come back, because you're great.
Well,
great nation, and
very
we
nice
need
to
you.
hear.
Europe needs you.
We're very grateful. But when you watch from the outside, you possibly get a clearer picture of what has gone on than here. The mystery is, and although I've got various answers to it, and you're right, I have spent 2 years picking over these particular carcasses, but from the outside, what do we look like? What happened? Because there's no earthly way that everybody who voted to leave the European Union is an idiot or a racist or a cretin or any of the rude words that are sometimes thrown at them. But they did believe things that have turned out not to be true, and they refuse to admit it now. So how do you, as an outsider, explain that? How do you understand it?
Well, my uncle, Slovenian, living in the States, voted for Trump, and we had a long debate the other day, and he shocked me, basically, but still rooting for him. And it does not, I'm afraid I do not have any good news, because the outside perspective would find things equally, we're not able to believe that things are happening.
No, well, this is it.
As they are, and I like Britain. I like it very much, but unfortunately there are some things that I don't understand either. And I think that one way is really to be polite. Funny thing is, this is, if 20 years ago, if you were on the left and you were provocative, you used rude language and you were in cool. But now it's cool to be polite and to check your facts. And we have to admit, nevertheless, that we misread the needs of a huge part of the population.
What were their needs, though? Because I keep hearing this. It reminds me of that phrase, legitimate concerns. And then, I've spent 10 years talking to people about their legitimate concerns, and not a single one of them has ended up providing a legitimate concern. They just provide racist sound bites and Daily Mail recyclings.
Yeah, but still, we are all, in average, better off. But envy is a strong force.
Oh, yeah, if you're supposed to envy people who've got more than you.
Out.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, we're better off, but a lot of people feel that they're not. So, I mean, and most people, certainly younger people, are going, well, actually, younger people are the least likely to have voted to make things worse, aren't they? It's odd. And envy is supposed to be directed at people who've got more than you, not people who've got less. Feeling sort of threatened by people who've got next to nothing. Well, they're going to come and nick my biscuits. Possibly. Cyril, thank you. I look forward to your next call from Ljubljana, from Slovenia, where we are, I suppose, reacting to the most astonishing 24 hours of news that I can remember witnessing. There is a Russian asset in the White House. You're perfectly entitled to be uncomfortable with that description, but the only viable explanation or alternative explanation you can have is that Donald Trump is so preternaturally stupid that he doesn't understand how bad it is to stand next to the president of Russia, the president of an enemy state, and side with him against his own intelligence services. So, look, best case scenario, he is dumber than the dumbest man in Dumbland. More likely scenario, he actually yesterday on that podium did what he was told. He said exactly what Vladimir Putin told him to say, which is, I don't believe that they meddled in our elections. Everybody, absolutely every intelligence agency, every informed individual in America knows that they did, but Donald Trump can't accept it. Maybe it's just ego. Doesn't want to admit that this gift was given to him by cheating, or maybe it's something even simpler than that, and he just has got a proverbial gun to his head. And then we come back to Britain, where again, maybe it's just ego, but now that the Brexit campaign group Vote Leave has been fined £61,000, referred to the police, found to have broken electoral law, the numbers, the stories that seemed so strange at the time have now been utterly confirmed. For me, the bit where credibility or credulity was stretched was when I read that a fashion student from Brighton University had been given £675,315, despite having previously raised his organisation the princely sum of £21.15. And you read it and you think, no, this can't be going on. These people turn up on Radio 4 all the time. It's the same people that set up the Taxpayers Alliance. Michael Gove is on the committee. Nigel Lawson is on the committee. Chris Grayling is on the committee. Priti Patel is on the committee. They can't be doing this stuff in broad daylight, not this baldly, not this clearly. And when the so-called whistleblower, Shamir Sani, first emerged, I have to confess, I thought perhaps you'd sort of been sour grapes, or that you were motivated by something. It just seemed too spectacularly strange to be believable. And as you may have gathered from that slightly torturous introduction, Shamir joins me in the studio now. Let's begin at the beginning, actually. This is vindication for you. This is validation. I know that last time we spoke, Vote Leave had somehow persuaded the BBC to let them determine the details of how the story would be broken. But today, the Electoral Commission is reported straight, and the story is Vote Leave broke electoral law. Referrals have been made to the police. Every single thing that you blew the whistle on has turned out to be true.
Yep.
How do you feel?
I feel vindicated, but I also feel now pressured to make sure that the people that called me a liar, the people that character assassinated me, the government that used my sexuality as a weapon, my former employer that fired me for whistleblowing, and every single cabinet minister that actively went on Twitter, on the media, to say that I was lying, should be held accountable for why they were so adamant on shutting the story down.
Do you think, I mean, I have to be legally a little bit careful, but I'm interested in your thoughts, because I'm still, Shamir, I've got to tell you, I suspect you've been on a similar journey, but you began from a position of idealism, I think, did you, politically? I still can't quite believe that some of the names I've just read out would have consciously joined in.
Well, this is why it took me so long to come forward.
Right.
It's because when you have lawyers, some of the most intelligent people in Westminster, some of the most influential politicians congratulating you for your work, saying, oh, Believe was amazing, reminding you that everything was fine. When you have number 10, people working in number 10, people advising the Prime Minister, people leading this country, telling you everything was fine, everything was okay. What else are you supposed to think? It was only through my own self-reflection, through my own sort of active belief in knowing both sides of the story, that I said, okay, you know what, let me reflect back on what happened. So let me go through everything and see.
And the conclusion you arrived at was that this is rotten. Yes. This is rotten to its core. For the avoidance of doubt, we would not be reporting this today if you had not blown that whistle.
Exactly. It's impossible. Michael Gove said, oh, there's already been 2 investigations. Their line now is, this is the 3rd investigation. They're sort of disrespecting the institution that protects our referendums, our democracy, our campaigns, and saying that, oh, there's already been 2 investigations, they did this 3rd one just because they want to stop Brexit. They did not have the evidence that I provided during the 3rd investigation to implicate Vote Leave in the first 2. Now they do, and now they have.
Just remind us of exactly what happened with that £675,000 that we've just referred to, because that was specifically the transaction that led to you being outed by your former boyfriend, Stephen Parkinson, who remains in situ at number 10 Downing Street. I mean, we sit here almost laughing at the situation in American politics, but this is, arguably, there are comparisons to be drawn. As you say, he's still a trusted confidant of Theresa May.
It's not just him. There are other people that were involved in Vote Leave that are sitting in number 10 making decisions.
Sitting in the cabinet.
Sitting in the cabinet. And so it goes to the very heart of whether this country really believes in the things that are military, that the thing we fight wars for, democracy. This is what we're talking about. It's not about Brexit. It's not about the Conservative Party or the Labour Party. This is quite literally about the very foundation of this country.
It's about
democracy.
the rules.
The law.
Yes.
Justice. So...
Talk me through that money, that's £675,000.
So this was, Believe was basically an outreach group created by Vote Leave at the very start of the campaign, and it was targeting, it sort of was going after progressive young liberal voters.
Right.
Like people like me.
Yes.
You know, moderate progressives. So we are focusing on things like on how we need to welcome everyone from the world, treat everyone on an equal playing field rather than prefer Europeans, etc.
Yes.
So it was a Vote Leave outreach group, and by the end of the campaign, Darren and I were sort of working on this outreach group, and then Vote Leave said, actually, you know what? We find a way of giving you money, and the lawyers advised us to create ourselves as a separate campaign. So Vote Leave guided Darren. This is what I mean. The onslaught on Darren has been unnecessary.
He's being hung out to dry.
He's being hung out to dry.
He's been thrown under
and
the bus.
AIQ was blaming Darren at the Canadian committee. Matthew Elliott is saying, oh, it's Darren's decision on BBC. They are hanging this young boy who started off at 21, same as me. It was only that he was so ingrained within this circle of people consistently manipulating him that he's sort of been implicated in this. He was used.
So that £675,000 was given to an organisation that was, to all intents and purposes, part of Vote Leave, but in order to get around spending rules, they pretended that it wasn't.
Exactly, and that's against coordination between two apparently separate campaigns.
Which the Electoral Commission has also found
yes.
to be the case. I don't know whether I'm obliged to offer them right of reply, but if Matthew Elliott wants to come on the programme, he'd be doubly welcome today. I'd love to talk to him. 0345 Matthew 6060973 is the number you need.
Or anyone that worked at Vote Leave.
Yeah, I particularly like to talk to him because I'm quite keen to get to the bottom of who funds the Taxpayers Alliance as well. But the phone lines are open, Matthew. Do crack on with your transparency and your commitment to democracy and your honesty and your openness. Remind us how you blew the whistle, Shamir.
I first spoke to the Guardian. I spoke to Carol because I knew that she was covering it. And then Christopher Wiley, who I was already friends with, who actually introduced me to Vote Leave when I first started, introduced me to Carol, and then I spoke to Carol first. And first I was scared. You know, it was new territory. I didn't trust journalists because I had been consistently told by the people involved in politics that I was working with that the Guardian was a propaganda machine and the typical, just codswallop, whatever. Yes,
of course.
So I spoke to Carol, and then I went to the Electoral Commission, and then the sole purpose of me going public was to ensure that was because this was in the public interest. I did it. I went public not for any other reason except that every single person in this country needs to know that Britain's entire democratic system is being corrupted.
This is speculative. Why?
What is?
Why are they doing it? Why are they? I mean, your view. Why are they corrupting Britain's entire democratic system?
This sort of, I don't know. You know what? It's partly ideological, partly this thirst for attention and power. And I've seen it and I've worked in this sphere for almost 2 years now. I've seen how they will, they sort of talk about there's this big thing within these spaces of talking about the freedom of speech and letting people give their opinion, yet they shut down anything that doesn't conform to either Ayn Rand or Adam Smith. You know, it's this total...
This is the absolute primacy of the market.
Yeah.
Profit, money, pursuit thereof should trump everything. There shouldn't be human rights, workplace protections, regulations, everything. The market will correct everything.
Ideological
purity. It's more Ayn Rand than Adam Smith, because Ayn Rand at least writes for the 20th rather than the 19th century.
My point is that they rely on this ideological purity to sort of convince themselves that what they're doing is right, that what they're doing is righteous, when really this is just them taking part in criminal activity. This is the breaking of law. There's no justification for it. There's no justification anyway for it. They just want to win, and they'll do whatever they need to do to make that happen.
Strange times. What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, there needs to be significant reform in terms of electoral law.
See, there's no point having another referendum, is there, if the situation is the same as it was during the last one?
Well, this is what I mean, right? This is a question that parliamentarians need to be asking. Are you going to side with a hard right group of men and women that took part in criminal activity, that knew about the breaking of law? Are you going to take their side and say, okay, let's go forward with this? Or are you going to hold your horses, say, okay, let's seriously think about what we need to do? Do we protect democracy by a new referendum vote? Do we protect democracy by putting these people in prison and still going forward, but in a different path? It doesn't matter. Parliamentarians aren't even talking about it. That's the issue, is that they've refused to talk about it. Not just parliamentarians, mainstream media, etc., etc. They're not talking about...
But it's a thread, isn't it? That's why. As soon as you tug that tiny thread, the whole suit will fall apart. That's why they can't talk about it. I mean, you've now got people sitting in the British cabinet who were on the committee of the campaign that's been found to have broken electoral law, and you've got Michael Gove yesterday claiming that the Vote Leave campaign shouldn't have weaponised immigration. I mean, you are literally now seeing people swearing blind that yesterday never happened.
And this is what I hope the British public realises, is that they can't rely on anything other than just the evidence.
Well, then, but that's why you undermine the institutions, isn't it? Because then the evidence becomes questionable, and we're back into Donald Trump territory, where nothing is objective and truth has been completely undermined. You've done well. Are you all right otherwise? I mean, what are you going to do work-wise and stuff like that? You must have been quite tumultuous times.
Well, if I'm trying to sue Downing Street. I'm suing Downing Street and the Taxpayers Alliance. So
well, keep us posted, won't you?
Yeah, we'll do.
Will do. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to say while you're here? I want to make sure you got everything off your chest.
This one, if you can help me with my legal funds, please do, because I am 24 and I am broke. So
we will. So let me know, get me the links, and I'll send them out from my Twitter account as well. It's just gone 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The question that we will return to after the news is a fairly straightforward one. I've been asleep for 2.5 years. Could you just take a moment out of your morning to explain, A, how we've ended up with a Russian asset in the White House, and B, how we've ended up leaving the European Union as a result of a campaign run by cheats and liars? No biggie. The comparisons with Chamberlain made about Donald Trump yesterday with Neville Chamberlain, a little bit unfair on Neville Chamberlain, actually, who acted appallingly, but in good faith, falling for the smile of Hitler. Donald Trump hasn't fallen for anything. He's made a conscious decision to back the man known to be an enemy of America, a man known to have meddled in American elections, a man known to have presided over a regime that shoots passenger planes out of the sky and poisons British people on British soil. So, I mean, Chamberlain was a chump. Trump is a traitor. He is a Russian asset in the White House. And still, people, I mean, admittedly they're quiet today, but there will be plenty of people around who are still sticking their fingers in their ears, closing their eyes and pretending that it can't be true because of what he gave them. And all he gave them was a scapegoat. He didn't give them hope. Nonsense did he give them hope. It's such a lie, and it's such an appalling undermining, really, of journalism to constantly bang on about, economic anxiety. It wasn't economic anxiety. He didn't give them hope. He gave them a gun and a target. And the target was immigrants, Mexicans and Muslims, and the gun was the ballot box. That's all he did. That's all he did. But it's such a powerful, powerful drug that some people are still under its influence, even after senior Republicans, Fox News, even after his cheerleaders and his supporters have been queuing up to describe his behaviour as treacherous. I mean, it is such a powerful drug, and this really is probably the disconnect. This is the 2.5 years I've spent in a coma. Nothing's actually changed. We've just worked out how powerful that drug is. You know, especially after a financial crisis when people are feeling a little bit bruised, they're on their uppers, they keep getting told that fella over there is getting preferential treatment, that immigrant over there got a council house, that single mother over there got 500 quid to spend on a pushchair, that Muslim over there is I don't know, allowed to do things that you're not allowed to do. All nonsense, all hogwash, all so intoxicating when you're feeling cross and frightened and failed. That's what he gave them. It's that simple. Brexit, kind of harder to work out until you remember just how much of a role, blame the immigration, blame the Muslims, blame the many calls we took from people saying, well, I voted Brexit because there's too many Muslims in this country. And you go, mate, you couldn't be any thicker if you spent 5 years trying to be thick. That's incredible. But they get the same vote that everybody else gets. So I would like something a little more sophisticated. in answer to these questions. After 2.5 years in a coma, I've woken up to find a Russian asset in the White House and Britain preparing to leave the European Union at the behest of a campaign run by cheats and liars. How did this happen? 03456060973. How did it happen? Mark's in South Molton. Mark, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. I mean, you mentioned about being in a coma for 2.5 years. I think you just
like my listeners. Sorry.
I think you've just alluded to the fact that this has been coming down the railway line for a very long time. Really, I mean, I remember a survey that I saw reported in 2013. It was reported quite widely. You probably remember it. I think there've been various surveys that have shown similar attitudes and similar misconceptions amongst the public, but I think this one was particularly stark. It said things like the public think that £24 out of every £100 of benefits is fraudulently claimed.
Yes, and the real figure was?
Yeah, official estimates are that just 70 pence in every 100 is fraudulent, so therefore public conception is out by a factor of 34. Immigration, 31% of the population is thought to consist of recent immigrants, when the figure is actually 13%.
Yeah.
People thought crime was rising rather than falling. People thought teen pregnancy was 25 times higher than it actually was. There
foreign aid?
Other things in there as well.
Is foreign aid in there?
Yes, foreign aid. Let me just scroll down because I Googled it and I found it. They think that foreign aid is in the top 3 items the government spends money on. It actually just makes up 1.1% of expenditure.
And EU membership, while you're here?
Sorry?
EU membership?
I don't think EU membership was specifically...
The cost, was it not?
I don't think so, but a lot of these things that I've just listed and other things that are in here are kind of proxies for the sort of things that people then use to justify their vote to leave the EU. And there's another interesting one.
So we're back to the Daily Mail then?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, because the question is, I expected you were going to ask me this as a follow-up question. Why did people believe this in 2013? Why were they so misinformed, and why did they have these misconceptions? And I think it must simply be, I mean, every now and then on Twitter you'll see someone will mash up a bunch of front pages from the Daily Express or the Daily Mail. You know, when the Daily Express is saying there's been some hate crime and it's shocking,
yeah.
Daily Mail says something similar, and then they'll show like a tableau of 25 front pages from the Daily Mail from the last year where they're saying about being swamped with immigrants and all the rest.
Yeah.
You know, that must be why. You know, that must be why people believe these things. How could people think that teen pregnancy is 25 times higher than it is? It must simply be because they see teenage pregnancies being reported in the news all the time.
And I suspect that phone-in radio played a part in this process as well, although thankfully not these 3 hours.
Definitely not these 3 hours, although there are plenty of other hours on other stations, and maybe even this station occasionally, unfortunately.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah, we do have a situation...
What? Sorry to interrupt you, and sorry to treat you like my therapist, my career therapist, because, I've worked on these newspapers. Admittedly, when I was on the Daily Express, it was going through a curious experiment in liberalism, and I've got mates that work for right-wing newspapers. I was the video games critic of the Daily Mail, and I was kind of conscious of how nasty they could be, but it didn't keep me awake at night until about a year or two before Brexit, when when the referendum got called, things went nuts, culminating in judges being called the enemies of the people and elected MPs being called saboteurs and universities being castigated for being objective and academic freedom. I mean, the astonishing assault on British values that happened after the result was staggering. But why do they do it? So why do they create an environment in which people, as you've highlighted to us, on an industrial scale, believe things that aren't true? Well, what's in it for them?
I think it's a kind of snowballing kind of ratcheting effect. I think you start with little lies. You start with the bendy bananas and things like that, and the fact that there is some immigration into the country, and there are some areas. I think people like myself and people like I think yourself, James, who are kind of liberal, have to accept that there are some pockets of the country where immigration has been bad locally for people, and people aren't happy about it, and they play on those prejudices. Paul Dacre. Thank goodness he is going soon, but he is a genius. We have to acknowledge that he is a genius because he plays and panders to the prejudices of his readership, and he publishes stories and allows stories to be published and has an editorial line that angries up the blood of his readers, and it sells papers. That's how Mail, the Daily
No,
Mail.
no, that's the bottom line then. I mean, all of this chaos, all of this carnage being inflicted on our country is a direct result of a slightly warped worldview coupled with a proven ability to sell newspapers, even in a dying market. That's it. It's all about selling papers.
I think it is about selling newspapers. There's a very interesting thing I saw Ben Goldacre draw my attention to a few years ago, where he pointed out that the Daily Mail in the UK had campaigned against the HPV vaccine for young girls.
Yeah.
But the Irish Daily Mail had campaigned in favour of it.
God.
It wasn't an ideological position by the organisation that owns those newspapers. It was what is going to sell the most newspapers in each of the territories that those papers are published in. And that just proved to me once and for all that actually in the end it's just purely about how much money can these people make. And they make money by pandering to the prejudices of the viewers, amplifying those prejudices, and then giving them justification for being angry by continuing to publish those sorts of stories.
And on it goes until eventually all of the people believe all of the lies, and the shocking statistics that you just shared with us get swamped and dwarfed by a new reality that could probably be best summed up as Trumpland. 11:15 is the time. Amazing callers, as always, today on the programme. Thank you, Mark. John's in Sydney, Australia. John, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking the call. I actually called in right after Trump's inauguration. I was in Tokyo at the time, and we had a chat about where we thought things would go.
I remember.
I expressed...
Yes.
Yeah, you do. That's good. I expressed some guarded optimism about what the next few years might hold.
How's that working out
and
for
I've been
you?
waiting for the... Well, yeah. I think I deserve that one. I've been waiting for the right moment to call in and sort of compare notes.
Good.
And
well, let's come back after the break. Are you all right? Did we ring you back? I'm going to go to the break. I don't want to squeeze you into the 20 seconds reminding, because you're right. It would be quite useful to sort of have a catch up. It's coming up to, or just gone 11:15. If you're worrying about those headlines that Mark just described off the top of Deborah's head, migrants, how many more can we take? Calais, send in the army. True toll of mass migration on UK Live. 4 out of 5 UK migrants aren't, what does that say? Aren't Syrians. I thought we were supposed to hate the Syrians as well. Migrant numbers hit new records. PM, why we must not take 3,000 children, migrant children. Britain's broken borders. Foreign workers get 3 in 4 new jobs. So today, the unemployment figures, people will be trumpeting them. It's not good news. Most of the jobs that people do now are poorly paid and appallingly resourced. But people will be pretending it's good news. The same people that last year were going nuts about the fact that 3 out of 4 new jobs are being given to foreigners. I mean, it is just utterly, everything is subverted. I wonder how we can... what's the opposite of subverted? How can we revert it? It's 11:15. This from a historian and security consultant called John Schindler, who I follow on Twitter and find to be very illuminating, because 99% of the people pushing that Trump is a Russian asset know absolutely nothing about real-world espionage and or Russia's modus operandi. Trump is what Czechists call an agent of influence. He's not an asset in any Western sense of the term. I thought I'd read that out because I've been using the word asset pretty much as a synonym for agent of influence, but the idea that he would be passing secrets to Russia is obviously not what anyone intends when they use that word. It's more the case that he does what Russia tells him. So they are two different things. John Schindler is quite right. I still like asset, though. John's in Sydney, an asset to this programme, with whom we conversed briefly after the result of the American election. And if memory serves, you kind of felt a breath of fresh air might be blowing across America, John.
I certainly was more optimistic than I am now. That would be fair to say.
So what's happened?
I think I still retain some hope. Going back to what you said earlier, I had a little more faith in my fellow Americans and my countrymen that they wouldn't stand for the things that have transpired over the past year and a half. Yes. But it seems to just get worse and worse every time I read the news.
There's a bit very, I don't know whether you should read it, actually. You're already sounding quite dispirited. But there's a brilliant piece by Fintan O'Toole in the Irish Times talking about how this is a testing ground for genuine fascism, and the things that you describe, I presume the things you're alluding to, like the separation of children from their families and the caging of babies, that these are not happening by accident. These are like dipping toes in the waters to see if the public will go along with it. And I wonder if that's the breakdown. I wonder if the public breaks down along the lines of people like you and me who just think at some point the public will object, and then people who perhaps have a better understanding of how fascist regimes end up in power and recognise you only need about 35 to 40% of the population to go along with it, and suddenly the rest of them are under the jackboot?
No, it's a good question, and I believe last time I checked his approval ratings, it's about where it sits, around the 40% mark. A large part of that, I think, is due to the fact he inherited a strong economy from his predecessor. If that were to change...
So you can keep pointing at that. You can keep pointing at the employment figures without mentioning that it's the 50th consecutive month or whatever it might be. He can claim that this upward curve is a result of him, not just the tail of the previous administration.
And it misses the point largely, which is that, yes, new jobs are being created, but how many of those are minimum wage jobs?
Welcome to our reality. We've got it in our news headlines today. We've got more people in work than ever before. We've got more people alive than ever before, and we've got falling wages in real terms, but that doesn't matter if you're spinning it politically. What do you think? I mean, I don't know how close an eye you keep on events back home, but what do you think might happen next? You've got some very interesting voices being added to the clamour today, from Fox News right through to Speaker Ryan, just very close to using the T word, but I don't know what checks and balances America can introduce at times like this.
Well, the only thing I'd say that we have as a functioning check and balance left would be the judicial system, the Mueller investigation, the fact that we have to talk about, whether or not we have to file state charges because the president might just pardon everyone at the federal level.
But that Mueller investigation, those things that you just referred to, he essentially abandoned yesterday in favour of Vladimir Putin.
No, that's exactly right, and that's really the reason I chose to call in today, because for me, I feel like there have been so many bad days, it's almost trivial to try and pick one, but I feel like when historians are putting the highlight reel together to try and convince people that this actually happened, I feel like today that press conference is going to be one of the key moments. And it's going to be one of the moments where people had to really decide, do you want to stick with this president or do you want to try and advance the interest of your country? And it's one of the most clear moments where I think people need to make that choice. But I don't have the confidence people are going to make the right choice from what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. I mean, yes, there's some half-hearted, not even condemnations in a lot of cases, just people voicing their disagreement. How about some anger? How about some outrage over the fact the president is ignoring his own intelligence apparatus to take the word of an adversarial power?
Well, I've seen some outrage. I'd be encouraged by that. I've seen the word disgusting used by a Fox News presenter. I've seen, what's the other guy, the CNN guy, Anderson Cooper, talking about the worst thing he's ever seen an American president do. You're right, it needs to come from the other side, as it were. It needs to come from the Republican side. And the bottom line there is that they probably won't make the noises that they should make morally, constitutionally, decently, unless they think that their electoral prospects are being damaged by Trump, which means America now, that 40% rump of Trump support, essentially now has to decide whether or not they're cool with Donald Trump prioritising Vladimir Putin over the FBI, the CIA, and the machines of American government. And suddenly all the attempts to malign the machines of American government and all the attempts to undermine honest media make perfect sense. John, I feel for you, actually. You're clearly a little bit more battered and bruised than those of us on this side of the Atlantic, but console yourself with the thought that Donald Trump is for one term or two. Brexit possibly is forever. Alex is in Camden. Alex, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Sorry to upset the apple cart, but I'm not going to agree with the current analysis of Trump as being a Russian asset. And I feel that you might have been asleep longer than you think.
Yes. Let's just focus on the press conference. When he was asked about the meddling in the election, which, as you know, every intelligence agency and the Department of Justice have all confirmed, and he essentially said, I believe Vladimir Putin. What do you think happened then? Why do you think he did that?
Well, I will give you three letters, WMD. I think the intelligence...
But I'll give you three, ABC. Now answer my question.
Well, that's my answer, is that the intelligence agencies in the West are totally discredited.
Right.
We were told, and I feel I've been asleep since 2001, we were told back in 2003 that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We believed what we were told, and journalists...
Lots of people didn't.
Yes, but journalists, in my opinion, James, told us that we should believe it, that it's all very convincing, and this is what the intelligence services are saying.
Right, so Vladimir Putin is telling the truth, and the department... Why have people pleaded guilty then? Why are they in jail if they didn't do it, Alex?
Well, I don't respect the... I don't...
No, I'm going to insist that you answer that question.
No, but if you don't...
No, I'm sorry, mate. I'm going to insist that you answer that question with your clever WMD red herring. Why have people pleaded guilty and gone to jail for things that never happened?
Who are we talking about now? The people who have gone to jail who have pleaded guilty in regards to the meddling with the American election?
Yes.
I have no... I can't answer. I don't know.
Well, then you're on the wrong show, mate. Sorry. Oz is in Woking. Oz, what would you like to say?
Hi. So you mentioned about the how would you explain this to somebody that's been in a coma?
Yes. I'm quite pleased with this. It hasn't necessarily gone as I intended, but carry on.
So I like to stick to the question.
Yes.
Actually, but, yeah. So I think that what's happening is people are reacting to stagnant politics, right? I'm like you. I'm pro-EU. I'm anti-Trump, right? But I think one thing that we need to accept is that politics and politicians, the system is not working. It's leaving people disillusioned and apathetic. And when you don't resolve that system, unfortunately, it can create irrational outcomes like this where people just react. So that's my worry.
Yeah, then you're almost two different species, aren't you? You're looking at someone you might be related to, someone you might work with, and you're saying, look, the emperor's got no clothes on, and they're saying, but I think he has got clothes on, and I've got legitimate concerns about immigration. And you're sort of going, no, he hasn't got any clothes on. You might have whatever about immigration or Muslims or single mothers or foreign aid or the EU. But look, there's a naked emperor. And that's what I don't get. I don't care how little faith people have in the system. I don't care how disillusioned they are. I fully appreciate that a lot of people feel that the way things are run is not to their benefit. And I understand how much poison gets poured into their ears by all of the usual suspects. But at what point, and this is why these children's fairy tales and these proverbs are timeless, isn't it? Because they speak of eternal truths. At what point do these people recognise that the emperor's got no clothes on? The president's in the pocket of Vladimir Putin. How much more proof do they need?
I don't think they will recognise, and I don't want to sound like I'm coming from some kind of ivory tower, but
no.
Unfortunately, stupid people do run the market. They do dictate the political and economic market. They're sucker to advertising. They're sucker to charismatic leaders that don't have any content, that don't have any substance. They just have a quip or two and a couple of red herrings. But unfortunately, people of this intellectual caliber do because they pander to these quips, they do actually dictate the political economy. They do, and that's the bottom line. And then people like yourself, you just have to sit back and be patient while you know what's going to happen and while you can see how the film is going to end. You just have to kind of swallow it and just watch it happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I do know how the film's going to end, to be honest with you. I'm genuinely worried at the moment because of the breakdown of all of the traditional institutions and mechanisms that are supposed to protect us from what you've just described, which I could loosely describe as the sort of atavistic, ignorant fury of a mob. But that's what the checks and balances are for. But Trump's undermined the checks and balances, and today Brexit has as well, because you now have a British democracy essentially subverted by criminal action. And yet, because so many people have invested emotionally so much in Brexit, they're going to pretend they're cool with that, or they're going to start spouting nonsense slogans about the other side. You're just as well. I know you, but that's what's happening now. That is the only response from Brexiters to the Vote Leave scandal today is, I know you are, but what am I? Here's Paul Ryan, the Republican Speaker of the House. The President must appreciate that Russia is not our ally. There is no moral equivalence between the United States and Russia, which remains hostile to our most basic values and ideals. The United States must be focused on holding Russia accountable and putting an end to its vile attacks on democracy. Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate Majority Leader and a very enthusiastic cheerleader of Donald Trump, stated, I've said a number of times, and I say it again, the Russians are not our friends, and I entirely believe the assessment of our intelligence community. You need to speak to Alex in Camden, Mitch. Former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh, who is, I mean, for my money, at the slightly toxic end of Trump's support, said this: "I've always tried to balance my personal distaste for Trump with my support for much of the agenda, the good Trump, bad Trump thing. After today, that dance is over. The bad Trump now clearly outweighs any policy benefits. He is a danger to this country. I can't straddle anymore." The Democratic representative Adam Schiff, who more pertinently is the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, called Trump's performance in Finland cowardly and shameful. "President Trump just attacked our intelligence agencies and law enforcement for doing their jobs while standing next to a dictator who intervened in our election to help elect Trump." Of course, an intervention in the American election that has already led to many arrests and indictments. So, if you've just woken up, what happened? 2.5 years I've been asleep, and I'm wondering how we've ended up with a Russian agent of influence in the White House and a British Brexit that was brought about by a campaign found to have broken the law, essentially run by cheats and liars. And just while we're reflecting on the Brexit angle of this, can we get these clips ready? Let's have a look at some of the stuff that these prominent Brexit people have said, because no one else is doing this. I thought by now... There was a nice bit of fact-checking, actually, at the weekend. Remember we did live fact-checking on Donald Trump's press conference after the NATO summit? Actually, the Times that weekend did something similar. They had breakout boxes in their newspapers. I'm told that on the news at 10, the BBC did some live fact-checking of Donald Trump as well. One can only hope it catches on. I certainly don't have copyright or any problems whatsoever with that being done by others. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So I am now going to spend a little time every day playing you what we should call blasts from the past, OK? So here is prominent Brexiter Daniel Hannan on the single market.
First of all, absolutely nobody is suggesting that we would give up our position in the free market in Europe. No one in Brussels, and no one except some tendentious British pro-Europeans. I've never heard anyone here suggest that we wouldn't have the same sort of deal that Switzerland has, or that the Channel Islands have, if you think that Switzerland's too exotic. In other words, free movement of goods and services and capital, but living under our own laws. So I don't see that there would be any impact in that sense.
So there you go, the will of the people. If you voted because you believed him, you voted on a misconception. So your vote was invalid. Your vote was cast based on things that have turned out not to be true. David Davis on the divorce bill. I always particularly enjoyed this.
I don't know about 50 billion. I mean, I've seen 40, 50, 60. I've seen no explanation for any of them. And Prime Minister said we are at the end, or coming to the end of the time when we're paying enormous sums to the European Union. We'll, of course, meet our international obligations, but we expect also our rights to be respected too. So I don't think we're going to be seeing that sort of money change hands.
Not that sort of money, but some sort of money.
Look, we have said before that we will meet our international obligations, or whatever that turns out to be. But that is nothing like we're talking about here. Indeed, the House of Lords committee on this subject reckoned that was zero only a few weeks ago.
Oh, so you're thinking you might pay zero?
Well,
no.
wait and see.
It is 11:38. Should we do one more just on how easy, because you know that trade deal they told us was going to be really easy. It's easy to forget now just how insistent they were that it would be really, really easy. Oh yeah, so easy, really easy.
We'd be better off in terms of global trade. We could do better trade deals than the European Union does on our behalf. We would not lose anything in terms of our access to European markets, because apart from anything else, the German car industry alone would have a 16 billion market put at risk. And Merkel, any German politician would not be able to allow that. So there's a very easy, not easy, but a very straightforward negotiation.
Do you think we would get all the advantages of the single market for we would pay no price for that access?
No, I think the only area where that won't work is on agriculture, where we'd have to have some particular deal. We'd have to subsidise British farming in a free market position. But other than that, it's pretty clear that the end game would be a free market arrangement.
Oh, go on then, one more, because Michael Gove yesterday attempted to reverse ferret from the weaponisation of immigration with which he was all too happy to join in the run-up to the referendum. He's obviously thinking when Theresa May finally walks the plank, he's going to have another go at the big job. Come on, Govey. And if he's going to have another go at the big job, he'll have to bring, you know, I mean, he's a West London metropolitan elite, Michael Gove. He's going to have to bring some of those conservatives with him. He's not going to be... He wants to get rid of the tar that is on his back as a result of getting into bed with proper full-on racists and fascists. Michael Gove wants to pretend that he never had anything to do with it. Bad luck, Michael. We've got tapes.
If we vote to remain, what we will be doing is actually signing up for a riskier future. We'll be signing up for picking up some of the bills of the European Union as it expands and as it adds 5 new countries. Albania, Montenegro, Macedonia, Serbia and Turkey are all on course to join the European Union. If we vote to remain, then we will be paying the bills to allow them to come in. In fact, we're paying at the moment nearly £2 billion in order to get these countries into the EU. That is a fact. And if we vote to leave, then we won't be paying that money anymore, and it will be the case that we won't be in a borderless zone with Turkey.
There was 5.2 million extra people who could end up moving to the UK by 2030. That was according to Michael Gove's claims that Turkey and 4 other countries could join the EU. He's given an interview to Tom Baldwin for his new book, Control, Alt, Delete, in which he says, I would have to go back and look at everything I said and think whether that was the right response at the time. There is a sense at the back of my mind that we didn't get everything absolutely right. It's a difficult one. Of course, people like me were telling you at the time that the Turkish accession to the EU was more or less impossible and we'd have a veto anyway. It was a Vote Leave video in May 2016 that argued David Cameron cannot be trusted on Turkey. Michael Gove on the committee of Vote Leave. 2016 June, a couple of weeks before the vote, Gove gave a second warning about Turkey, arguing that if the country was ever to join the EU, it would create a risk to security. With the terrorism threat that we face only growing, it is hard to see how it could possibly be in our security interests to open visa-free travel to 77 million Turkish citizens and to create a border-free zone from Iraq, Iran and Syria to the English Channel. The likelihood of Turkey joining the European Union in 2016 was 1 out of 10. Today it's 0 out of 10. But Gove is trying to distance himself. I've kept people on hold for too long. I shall speak to a couple of them, then I might give you a little bit more Gove-based facts. Will's in Annerley, if he hasn't dropped off. Will, are you still there?
Just about, yes. How are you, James?
Imagine you've been in a coma for the last 6 minutes.
Indeed, I imagine. Sorry about that. No, it was just to say, I was listening previously to the people, or and yourself, mentioning Trump as Chamberlain. I see him more as a Hitler figure. And I almost equate the First World War with the financial crash. Populism, obviously, in Germany, with Hitler, took hold after the First World War. They felt battered and bruised. Much the same, I feel, as people felt after, and still do, after the financial crash. It gave rise to this idea of elites that run the world, playing fast and loose with everyone's lives. And the populism now, the spell's been cast. The problem with this is, we're now in between the First and the Second World War. And it strikes me that we have this to come. This sort of populist message always leads to violence in one way or another, economically, physically.
The Germany between the wars, I mean, I think most historians now would agree that it was, if you like, I don't know if unfairly is quite the right word, but the reparations that were inflicted upon Germany after the First World War, that's a real grievance, whereas the grievances of Trump fans are not real.
Absolutely. Right. But they're tapping into, they're making people feel aggrieved. America's economy was doing very well, as was the UK's before Brexit.
Relatively,
but for some reason, people wanted to feel persecuted. So they view, I think that this as a mark, as using the financial crash as a line to say, there are these elites. These are the people that are running your lives. We understand you and your lives, how you're persecuted. Believe us, and we will make your lives better. Much the same as Hitler did with the other European countries in America. He said, I have the answers to all your very complicated problems in very, very simple terms.
The Jews did it.
Doing the same thing. He's doing the same thing, but the only problem is there hasn't been a war.
Well, you say it's a problem.
Well, it's. I mean, if the problem, Christ, I mean, obviously that's a massive understatement. But it's the.
The corrective nature of international conflict makes a post-war environment in which people are grateful for what they've got if they won. But the German model reminds us that if they lost, then peace is not precious because well, obviously the ramifications of losing can be too profound. I've kept up with you about 80% of the way on that, and then you just scared me.
Well, it strikes me that once this spell has been cast, it's now proven that it can't be broken through logic and truth.
Well, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I mean, how is Trump going to unwrap? I mean, Brexit's one thing. We've got a vote that was essentially delivered by cheats and liars who broke the law, and an awful lot of people who were cheated and lied to are going to pretend that they don't care. But Trump is different. Trump yesterday made it clear that he favours Vladimir Putin over his own agencies. Is that going to snap anything? Is that going to break anything?
No, I don't think so. I listened yesterday, and there was a guy. I'm not sure it was on your show or someone else's, and he was adamant that the shooting down of the airplane, the annexing of Crimea, this wasn't actually Putin. And I think that
one idiot does not a summer make.
No, of course. But I think we can all agree there are still many fans of the man. Why that is, I can't explain it, and I know you can't either.
Well, I can. I just hate the explanation. The explanation is that he's allowed me to blame Muslims and immigrants for everything that's wrong in my life, for the fact that women don't like me, for the fact that I don't know how to talk to my own children, for the fact that I have to survive on a relative pittance, and I want to blame it all on someone else. And Trump lets me. He's a big, shiny TV star, and he lets me blame it all on Muslims and Mexicans. That's all he gives them.
Absolutely, but I think everyone underestimated how many of these people there were.
Yeah, I did.
Still are.
I know.
And still are. And this is the problem. You can't break a spell that's been that is so far-reaching and gives people such easy answers.
Yeah, except for the point where he stands up and says, yes, Mr. Putin, no, Mr. Putin, 3 bags full, Mr. Putin, at which stage you should go, even if you are completely seduced by the toxicity of the message, at which point you should sort of go, hang on a minute, if he's doing what Vladimir Putin wants, he's probably not doing what's best for me. But you're right, we're talking about intoxication, and to be logical about intoxication is probably a little naive. Where we will, I think, shortly draw a line under today's adventures into comatose radio presenters. The challenge, which you didn't actually choose to accept, and I'm very grateful to you for doing so, was to explain to someone who'd been asleep for 2.5 years how we've ended up with a Russian agent of change, or agent of influence in the White House, a man who prioritises Vladimir Putin above his own intelligence agencies. And secondly, now that we know for sure that Brexit was delivered upon a raft of lies and crimes, how the hell did we let that happen? Why aren't people getting angrier about that today? 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. And unfortunately, and this is, I think, what people like me find so hard to swallow and so heartbreaking, there isn't much else. We could sit here for another 7 hours. There isn't much else, is there? But why? Why don't people care more? And the answer is clearly, seeing democracy subverted, seeing truth utterly corrupted, seeing countries diminished and damaged, seeing populations divided and violent, potentially. That's all on one side of the scale. And people like me say, but what on earth is on the other side of the scale that makes all that okay? And the answer is, some people kind of like the idea of hate and violence and division being weaponized, and more importantly, some people care more about having a scapegoat, having someone to blame, than they do about anything else. I guess I kind of half get that. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Dan's in Bicester. Dan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'd just like to say that I don't disagree with anything that you've said, but I think there's an overriding effect, which is political apathy and ignorance in both countries, both Britain and America. And I think that if we as society were more engaged, then the influence of a campaign that has acted illegally wouldn't have such an impact on a result such as Brexit.
Well, I don't know that I agree with you, because I mean, the people who will be most furiously seeking to persuade themselves that voting as a result of a campaign that broke the law and was run by cheats and liars, they are very engaged. It's just a question of what they're engaged in.
Well, in a way, then, I'd say that that's the same thing, because it's not engaged in the actual political narrative of today.
Or the reality as opposed to the narrative. It was that call from Mark earlier in Devon, I don't know if you heard it, when he went through that survey of the reality versus the public perception of everything from immigration to welfare payments to single mothers to foreign aid, that they're engaged with that, but that's a false reality.
It is a false reality, but ultimately, if they're engaged in the real reality, which is that immigration actually brings a surplus to the country and doesn't actually impact the economy in the way that the Project Fear element of Leave tried to push out there, then they would have realised that actually what was coming out of that campaign at the time was inaccurate. They allow themselves, because they're not, they take the easy route. They go through your best friends, the Daily Mail, and read the headlines. They go through the Murdoch media because it's the easy headline to follow. I mean, we're all guilty of things. I think I'm an expert in football because I read the back pages. I barely watch it, if I'm honest. And I think that the problem is we allow ourselves to be engaged. And, you know, we look at what's happening in America with Trump at the moment. And quite frankly, Trump should never have got anywhere near the White House. It should never have happened. It happened because the Democrats had one of the worst campaigns in history. And I say that having phoned you a while ago about Theresa May's general election last year. But Hillary Clinton's was far worse than that.
Was it? Are you sure? Are you sure
yes,
that when all of the stuff? Because I mean, crikey, I don't hold a torch for her at all. But I wonder whether we've been gaslighted without realising it. Because every single time one of Donald Trump's vile transgressions emerged, whether it was boasting about being a sex offender, whether it was refusing to publish his tax returns, whether it was the comments about wanting to date his own daughter. Well, I mean, all of the disgusting things came out. And then you also had some of the troubling links that Paul Manafort appeared to have with Russia long before he ended up in jail. These things were being reported. And then the media always did the BBC-style balance. The media would always report on one of Donald Trump's epic transgressions and balance it out by saying, well, but her emails or something about Hillary. It was almost as if they couldn't report on Donald Trump being disgusting without also reporting the stuff about Hillary Clinton, which we now know to be incredibly trivial. But the fact that it was always in the story perhaps made people like you and me judge her campaign even more harshly than we should have done. I don't know.
But actually, I would argue that the biggest problem with Hillary's campaign is that she claimed to be for the people while saying it from a $10,000 a plate dinner.
Yes, although Donald Trump's got a golden lift and he claimed to be for the people, and he has a long history of riding roughshod over working people and robbing them blind as well.
But Donald Trump ultimately had the proof of the pudding, and that he is a billionaire by whichever means it can be debated at a different time. But he is a billionaire. He's a celebrity. He got himself out there.
Well, I don't think he is.
Hillary Clinton represented true, but Hillary Clinton represented the establishment, and there is a huge anti-establishment element to both Brexit and Trump.
Yeah, and that's the trick. I guess that's the other bit that people don't get. How can it be anti-establishment when it's run by Goldman Sachs bankers, billionaires, and I mean, same with Brexit, actually. How can it be anti-establishment when the men that owned the Ritz bankrolled a lot of it? Not just Boris Johnson's column, of course, but sundry other things as well. Anti-establishment and own the Ritz. That's an astonishing thing to have pulled off. Dan, thank you. Adam's in Hatfield for the last word on this. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I just wanted to really agree to some extent with your last two callers, really. I want to really quote Bill Clinton when he said, it's the economy, stupid. Now, that's where it all started, if we really want to see where the seeds of this all came from. We had a Labour government through from 97 to 2010, during which time inequality increased massively. People got incrementally better at the bottom end of the scale, but then the financial crash of 2008 obviously had a devastating impact for the people on the margins of society. And then obviously, so they enjoyed a Labour government, they voted in a coalition, their lives didn't improve, then they voted Conservative and their lives still got worse. And just as in the 1930s, when you vote for all of the traditional parties and nobody has done anything to help you because we followed austerity for however many years, eventually you turn to somebody different, not because you necessarily think that they're wonderful and that they are.
But you just think it doesn't have to be like this.
Yeah, you
anything that represents significant change will be seductive.
Exactly. Because
even though he's changing nothing, I mean, he's magnifying the swamp, he's extending the swamp, he's brought in the builders to build a new swamp. He said he was going to drain the swamp, so they gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. And when you look at, it's not a vote for Trump. as much as it is a vote for everybody else. I mean, all of our main political parties got into bed with corporate power. And I try and argue with my friends and explain it's not liberalism that you oppose, it's neoliberal economics.
Of course
that's
it is.
too complicated for a lot of people.
Well, maybe it is. And also, especially if you lean to the right, the idea that you've actually voted to impoverish yourself while putting more and more money into the pockets of the corporate world is going to be incredibly difficult to swallow. But I had this chat this morning with someone actually who said, how do you get ordinary people to care about this stuff? And I said, what's going on in your world at the moment? And he said, I'm getting shafted at work. I said, do you talk to your colleagues? Do you ever threaten to down tools? Do you bargain collectively? And he thought I was talking French. You know, and there it is. He's getting shafted by shareholders, and more of his wages are going to go into the pockets of the owners of the company than they currently do already. And yet, him and his colleagues have nothing to do, or feel that they have nothing to do. I'll tell you what, and this is not a penny drop moment, but it's not necessarily flattering either to his supporters. But this is Corbyn as well. This isn't just Trump and Brexit. Oddly, people who are properly unhappy with the status quo, people who really do feel what the last caller reflected, that however the economy is run and however the relationship between business and the population is policed, I as a member of the population feel that I'm losing. I feel that I'm being either left behind or shafted or exploited, and it's the fault of the bosses, not the fault of the Muslims and the Mexicans. Corbyn is selling that first ticket.